Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. You know, Ronald Reagan once said when he was president, "I have left orders to be awakened at any time in case of a national emergency, even if I'm in a cabinet meeting." Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at Mr. President from GMT Games. We'll get back to the review in just a moment. I want to take a minute to ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, books on history, military history. I even post some of my lectures for my classes on there. Please check that out. Please subscribe to that channel. And now, back to the review. In Mr. President from GMT Games, one player takes on the role of Mr. President, or Madame President if you prefer. In any event, you're going to go ahead and set up a massive board that's going to have space for the White House, the cabinet. You're going to have various regions around the world, various hot spots around the world. Then you're going to have a second player board that's going to have space for the Congress, for kind of regional conflict measurements, and kind of your strategic abilities vis-a-vis the Russians and the Chinese. So at the very beginning of the game, you're going to select your cabinet. Essentially, it's a random draw from potential candidates. You're going to choose your vice president, your chief of staff, your secretary of state, and your secretary of defense. And they're each going to have various ratings on them that may give you some positive DRMs when you need them. Now, the heart of the game revolves around the turn sequence track. Now, the turn sequence track is essentially this track that, when played out, equals 1 year of your presidency. And it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. That is to say, you have a turn sequence track flip book. And this flip book, as you're playing the game, as you move from one part of the sequence track to another, the flip book is going to tell you exactly what you do on that turn, what options you have. Now, many times, it's going to be kind of a passive thing. Things are happening on the board, you're drawing cards, and sometimes when you draw the event cards, and the event cards too are arranged in special ways, and I'm not going to get into that so much here, but there's kind of a trick to it. But when you draw the cards, they may be things you react to. They may just take points away from your approval rating, or your relationship with Congress, or these sorts of things. But you may have choices. It may give you, say, you can do this, or you can do this. So you go ahead and you get all that figured out. You get a lot of the passive stuff done, but you may have things pop up in other parts of the world as well. Various crises or what have you. And then you, on certain turns, will be given actions. And sometimes it will say you can take, diplomatic or military actions, or sometimes you can do domestic actions, or there's different things. Now, critically, you have kind of 4 master areas. You have presidential actions you can take, you have domestic actions you can take, you have diplomatic actions you can take, and you have military actions you can take. And you each have a player aid for each of those, saying what are all the actions you can do under those events, under those actions. Now, whenever you, like for instance, you may go into foreign areas. You may, there may be times where you're looking at areas, you're trying to get rid of Chinese or Russian influence in a region. Or perhaps there's a terrorist group that you're trying to track down. You want to move them up from kind of the main screen there up onto kind of your watch track so that you can see them. And if they get far enough along the watch track, you can try to target them and take them down. And the whole time you're trying to figure out what your DRMs are, right? You've got to figure out how are my dice rolls going to be affected by this. Now, sometimes you may get some good DRMs, sometimes you may get some bad DRMs, and a lot of the time, sometimes DRMs just won't matter. And critically, too, you have two different die. You're rolling on a 6-sided die, and you're rolling on a 10-sided die. Now, critically, too, at the beginning of the game, you're going to kind of set your presidential agenda. You know, what legislation do you want to get through Congress? Do you want healthcare reform? Do you want education reform, welfare reform? Do you want gun legislation? What specific things do you want, right? So you can go ahead, you can select those, but also, too, randomly, you're going to kind of have what the public wants and what they're trying to go for. But then you're going to have opportunities on that turn sequence to try to get your legislation passed through Congress. And they're going to be you're going to be able to put them on a track, and then depending on what kind of support you got in Congress, or if you got a good bipartisan relationship in Congress, it's going to be easier to pass those things. And if that's not the case, it's going to be worse. And again, it's going to come down to die rolls and DRMs. But you're trying to get your legislation passed. That's going to boost your approval rating, boost your relations with the media, maybe affect your relations with Congress. So there's all these things, all these factors that are going to go on domestically as well. Now, once you've completed the full game year, then you have some housekeeping that you're going to do, and you're going to set up for your second year. Now, at the end of your fourth year, you can call it a game, but regardless of whether you call it a game or whether you move on to do a full 8 years, you have to run for re-election. You're going to lose the game immediately if you don't get re-elected. If you can get through the entirety of your term, you're going to go ahead and look at all sorts of things, but critically, you're looking at your legacy points. Over the course of the game, depending on what you can do, both domestically and in the world, you can gain legacy points. Now, the legacy points is kind of, again, your legacy. How successful of a president were you? And you're going to go ahead and, at the end of the game, see how successful you were based on your legacy, see what your final score is. So there's a lot of different ways you can auto-lose the game. If ever China, and I think Russia, if ever they get enough influence individually on the board and bases, which is like equal to 3 influence in a region, they win, or rather, you lose instantly. If ever NATO and Russia go to war, you lose instantly. If ever Iran is far enough along their nuclear track and they go to war with Israel, you lose instantly. If there's a level 4 rogue state at the end of your turn on the board, you lose instantly. If you run out of rogue counters, you lose instantly. If more than 5 wars break out on the board, you lose instantly. But if you can see through to the end of your turn and accrue enough legacy points, then you win, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, this is, first of all, it's probably the ultimate spinning plates game, right? Trying to keep everything going the way you want to go. Because you got to worry about the world, you got to worry about Congress, you got to worry about your cabinet, you got to worry about your approval rating, relations with media, the economy, the economies of other states. There's so much going on here. This is, and my overview of the rules didn't even scratch the surface of the depth and complexity of this game. Well, let me back up. The depth of this game. I don't think this is a particularly complex game. I think on a scale of 1 to 10, GMT I think rated it 5. That's fair. There is a ton going on here, and this is a long game. But having said that, it is it's not overly complex, and there's a lot of systems, there's a lot of rules, but nothing is terribly difficult to grasp or understand. And really, as I say, most of the game comes down to DRMs and dice rolls. Now, whenever you take an action, you're going to be looking something up. And I mean, I guess when you get far enough into it, you won't have to, but if you played enough, you won't have to. But you're going to be looking up rules. And you've got, like I say, you've got those different actions with each of their own player boards. They've each got their own booklets, too. So you're looking through the domestic books. You're looking through the military books or the diplomatic books, right? And there's a governing manual. There's a how to play. There's that flip book for the turn sequence. Honestly, I think there's more manuals in this game than I've ever seen in any game ever. I want to say it was like 8 or 9. I mean, it's wild. Which brings me to another point.
A few weeks ago, I did my top 10 real estate hog games, right? If I had if I played this one before I made that list, this would be on it. This might be number one. This game, like I say, the main board took up my entire table. This table was entirely taken up, and I had to put the other board on my counter, and took up a huge chunk of my counter too. Then with the books, I got a little TV tray to put all my books on, and then you've always got counters everywhere. It's massive. It is a massive game. When I was punching out all the counters and stuff, I'm thinking, how am I going to keep track of this? I'm thinking, oh man, I'm in over my head on this one. And it's funny because when I actually set it up, it's like, oh, okay, all right, this way, I get it. So it's not, I didn't find the game overly complicated at all. It's big and there's a lot going on, but not overly complicated. But we've got this other elephant in the room, and that is the time limit for the game. Now, I started setting this game up, and I thought, okay, I'll set it up and I'll play it. And it took me about 3 hours to set up. Now, I wasn't consistently setting up. I was kind of also talking on the phone, and I was doing some other things. But it took me a big chunk of time. So by the time I had it set up, I thought, I'll play it tomorrow. I didn't want to jump into it that night. And the night I started playing it was the 4th of July. So I started playing this baby on the 4th of July, which I thought was appropriate. And in that night, I played through the first 6 months of my first year. And it was a few hours. It was probably, again, about 3 hours. And then the next night, I played the next 6 months. And it was probably slightly less. Maybe it was about a little more than 2 hours that I did that. So you did pick up. But, full disclosure, that's what I played. I've just played the first year because I just don't have the time right now to devote to it. But man, I got to find the time, and it might not be till next summer or sometime maybe over Christmas when I got some time. But this is one I'd like to play at least the full 4 years, maybe even go the full 8. Because I have to tell you, this game is outstanding. It is so incredibly good. And I'll tell you why it's so good. It's good because it tells such a good story. You know, it's like that. It's like It's Life from Frank Sinatra. You know, you're riding high in April, shot down in May. Right? It's so funny because it's like you're playing this game, and like I took down a terrorist organization, and so my approval rating goes. I get like huge approval. I'm like, oh, all right, yeah, pretty cool. And then it's just like, you know, a couple turns later, I like failed to get some legislation through or something like that, and you know, I'm in the toilet again. I'm in the crapper again. And it's fun. It's just so much fun to see that. And the decisions you make all feel so meaningful and important. And you're watching that legacy, and you're trying to push that legacy score up. And it's not as easy as you like, especially when your approval ratings are going down. You really gain an appreciation for what it is to be president. Now, I'll call this a presidential simulator because that's what it feels like, right? It simulates being the president. But of course, obviously, it's a very different thing in real life. But that's what it feels like, the presidential simulator. So I really like that. Now, probably my favorite part of the game, and there's a lot of favorite parts because it's fun hunting down the terrorists, and it's fun kind of trying to find that balance with the Chinese and the Russians of you want to make sure they're not getting too powerful and too strong in the world, but at the same time, you can't just slap them upside the head, right? Because there's going to be repercussions for that. And so it's this delicate balance of rivalry, but also partnership, which I really appreciated, and which I think reflects kind of real world dynamics. But I think my favorite part of the game is the cards. Now you're drawing, when you get to certain parts in the turn sequence, you draw these counters. And these counters, or chits, they will say how many cards you draw, and then if you're going to draw more. And they can do some other funky things too, but critically they're going to be kind of that's how you're going to draw the cards. So you go and you draw these cards, and the cards are fun because, again, it's the spice and sugar. Sometimes they really screw with you. Sometimes they help you out. And then a lot of times, though, they will give you decisions, and they'll give you decisions about what you can do. And those decisions are meaningful and impactful to the game. This is an experience. This game is it feels like more than a game. And if I had any complaint about it, it's not even a complaint really, it's more of an observation, is I wish there was some kind of a way they could have made this game where you could play with one or two other people. And I mean, of course you can. You can play this game cooperatively. But I mean, if there were specific roles, right? If you could maybe assign people to be the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and those sorts of things. I wish there was a mode for that, because that would be cool if you play this game with other people. I'd really enjoy that. But again, you've got that idea of time. It's a long game. And that's what's working against it. You need the time and you need the table space. But if you've got those things and you're considering this one, man, you owe it to yourself to check it out. I'm looking at this one so far. I'm thinking it's so far it's probably my top contender for Game of the Year. I gotta look some more. Like I said, I want to screw around with it some more, but it may be a while before I get to it. But based on what I played, I love this game. I think it's awesome. It's by Gene Billingsley. I believe he's the G in GMT Games, and it's just, again, an outstanding game. Highly recommend it. Recommendation for the discriminating gamer from Mr. President is buy it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We'd ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. I'd also ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to please check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history, books on history, fun things like that. Please check it out. I'm currently uploading my World War II lectures onto that channel if that's something you're interested in. But if you'd subscribe to that, it would mean a lot to me. And then also please leave a like for us here on YouTube and on Board Game Geek. That also helps us out as well. If you really enjoyed the content we bring to you here on The Discriminating Gamer, I would ask you humbly, please click on the Super Thanks button here on the YouTube screen. Make a contribution. Again, that we would really appreciate that. You know what, ladies and gentlemen, Abraham Lincoln was once accused of being two-faced, and he famously responded, "If I have two faces, then why am I wearing this one?"
Please somebody help me on my feet again, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band. God knows that I love the
Hello, Space Engineer Cody. This is Space President Sean talking on the space phone. I'm just up here in space, sitting on my space chair, wondering where my space and spaceship is. And where the crap is Space Justin Cody? Space Captain Justin.